They laughed before the lawyer even finished clearing his throat. Not loud laughter. Not cruel shouting. It was worse. Soft chuckles. Side glances. Smirks exchanged across the polished wooden table like inside jokes I wasn't part of. I sat at the far end of the conference room, hands folded neatly in my lap, spine straight, expression calm. I'd learned long ago that posture mattered when your presence didn't. The room smelled faintly of leather, old books, and expensive cologne. The scent of money that had never needed to prove itself. My family filled the rest of the table. My older brother leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, confidence radiating off him like heat. He wore a tailored suit that screamed inheritance rather than effort. My sister sat beside him, perfectly composed, lips curled in a smile that barely hid her satisfaction. My aunt whispered something to my cousin, who covered her mouth to suppress another laugh. And then there was me. The extra chair. The afterthought. The person invited not out of respect, but obligation. The lawyer adjusted his glasses and looked down at the folder in front of him. As you all know, he began, we are here to read the last will and testament of. My brother interrupted him with a short laugh. Come on, he said, shaking his head. We already know how this goes. My sister nodded. Let's just get through it. The lawyer paused, eyes flicking briefly toward me before returning to the document. I didn't react. I'd been underestimated my entire life. This room wasn't new territory, it was familiar ground. When our father died 3 weeks earlier, the family hadn't called me immediately. I found out through a distant relative, 2 days late, through a message that ended with thought you should know. No condolences. No urgency. Just information. Growing up, I had always been the quiet one. Not the favorite. Not the achiever everyone bragged about at gatherings. I wasn't the one whose successes were announced loudly or whose failures were softened with excuses. I was the one they didn't worry about. He'll figure it out, my father used to say. That sentence followed me everywhere. At school. At family dinners. At every moment where someone else was chosen over me. My brother had the business degree. My sister had the connections. I had silence. When I didn't follow the expected path, when I dropped out of college after my 2nd year, my family decided my story was finished. They told themselves I'd failed. That it was easier than asking why. They never asked what I did next. They never asked how I paid my bills. They never asked where I went on weekends. They never asked why I never borrowed money. Silence makes people careless. The lawyer cleared his throat again and began reading. Item 1, he said, the primary residence shall be transferred to. My brother leaned forward eagerly. To my son, the lawyer continued, in accordance with the terms outlined herein. My brother smiled, victorious. My sister rolled her eyes. Obviously. I stared at the grain of the table, listening without emotion. None of this surprised me. The house had always been his. At least in everyone's mind. Item 2, the lawyer continued, financial accounts held jointly shall be divided. Another pause. My aunt let out a small laugh. Here we go. I could feel it building now. The unspoken assumption hanging heavy in the air. They were waiting for the part where my name would be skipped. Where the lawyer would politely move on as if I had never existed. The lawyer's voice droned on, listing assets, distributions, legal phrasing. And then he stopped. Actually stopped. He didn't turn the page. He didn't continue reading. Instead, he placed his pen down carefully, folded his hands, and looked up. Directly at me. Before I proceed, he said slowly, I need to ask everyone to remain seated. The laughter died instantly. My brother frowned. Why? The lawyer didn't answer him. He was still looking at me. There are additional instructions, he continued, that require full attention. My sister shifted uncomfortably. What instructions? The lawyer took a breath. At the explicit request of your father, he said, certain provisions are to be explained verbally, not simply read. A strange silence filled the room. Not awkward. Heavy. I felt something shift, not inside me, but around me. Like gravity changing direction. The lawyer turned another page. And that's when my family stopped smiling. The lawyer didn't rush. That alone made everyone uneasy. People who are used to control hate pauses. Silence gives too much room for doubt, and doubt is dangerous when you've built your confidence on assumptions. My brother cleared his throat. What exactly is going on? The lawyer finally broke eye contact with me and glanced around the table. His expression wasn't dramatic. It wasn't smug either. It was professional. Your father, he said, anticipated this reaction. My sister laughed nervously. Reaction to what? You haven't said anything yet. He nodded. Exactly. He slid a single document out of the folder and placed it on the table, separate from the rest. This, he said, tapping it lightly, is an addendum. It supersedes several sections of the main will. My aunt leaned forward. Supersedes how? It overrides them, the lawyer replied calmly. Completely. My brother's smile thinned. Overrides which sections? The lawyer looked down at the document, then back up. All of the financial distributions. The room went still. Not quiet, still. As if even the air had decided to stop moving. That doesn't make sense, my sister said quickly. We already heard the allocations. Yes, the lawyer replied. You heard the default allocations. He turned another page. Your father made changes 3 years ago, he continued. They were filed, notarized, and sealed. No one contested them because no one knew to. My cousin whispered, why wouldn't he tell us? The lawyer's gaze flicked to me for half a second, then back to the table. He didn't want opinions, he said. He wanted outcomes. My brother let out a short laugh, sharp and forced. So what, this is some sentimental thing? A message? A letter? In part, the lawyer said. But mostly, it's structural. That word landed wrong. Structural wasn't a word people expected in a family inheritance. According to this addendum, the lawyer continued, your father transferred the majority of his liquid assets into a private trust. My sister frowned. Who's the trustee? The lawyer didn't answer immediately. He turned the page again. The trust, he said slowly, was established with one beneficiary. My brother leaned back, crossing his arms again, confidence returning. That would be me. The lawyer shook his head. No, he said. It would not. The color drained from my sister's face. My aunt's mouth fell open. My brother sat up straight. Then who? The lawyer finally turned toward me fully. The beneficiary, he said clearly, is you. The room exploded. What? That's not possible. This has to be a mistake. He dropped out. He never even worked with Dad. Voices overlapped, sharp and disorganized. I stayed seated. I didn't smile. I didn't defend myself. The lawyer raised his hand slightly, and slowly, the noise died down. There's more, he said. My brother laughed again, louder this time, but there was panic underneath it. You expect us to believe Dad left him everything? Not everything, the lawyer corrected. Control. That word hit harder than money. Your father, he continued, retained ownership of several operating companies, investments, and properties under holding structures that were never publicly associated with him. My sister swallowed. Why would he do that? Because he didn't want them treated like toys, the lawyer replied. He wanted them protected. My brother slammed his hand on the table. Protected from who? The lawyer didn't answer. He didn't need to. He appointed you, the lawyer said, looking at me, as the sole decision-maker for those assets. I finally spoke. He trusted me to keep quiet, I said calmly. Every head in the room snapped toward me. My brother stared like he was seeing me for the first time. You? I met his eyes. You were loud. I was useful. Silence followed. The lawyer nodded slightly, as if confirming something. Over the past 3 years, he continued, the beneficiary has already been involved in managing these assets. Informally. Off record. My sister's voice shook. That's not true. He never mentioned? He wasn't required to, the lawyer interrupted. In fact, your father explicitly instructed him not to. My aunt whispered, why him? The lawyer paused. Because, he said, your father believed that the person least obsessed with inheritance was the only one who wouldn't destroy it. My brother stood abruptly, chair scraping loudly against the floor. This is insane, he snapped. He doesn't deserve this. I looked up at him. Deserve has nothing to do with it, I said. Responsibility does. He pointed at me, shaking. You think this makes you better than us? No, I replied evenly. It just means Dad saw what you refused to. The lawyer cleared his throat again. There is one final condition, he said. Everyone froze. The trust, he continued, becomes fully active today. My sister's eyes widened. What does that mean? It means, the lawyer said, all associated accounts, voting rights, and ownership transfers execute immediately. My brother's voice cracked. Immediately? Yes. I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket. Once. Twice. Again. Notifications. I didn't check them yet. The lawyer closed the folder. This meeting, he said, is adjourned. No one moved. No one laughed. Because for the first time, the story they'd told themselves about me had collapsed. And they didn't know what replaced it yet. The first thing that changed was the air in the room. Not metaphorically, literally. People stopped breathing normally. My brother's chest rose and fell too fast, like he was preparing to argue with reality itself. My sister's hands trembled as she pressed them flat against the table, trying to ground herself in something solid. I stayed seated. I'd learned a long time ago that when power shifts, the person who moves last usually controls the outcome. The lawyer didn't wait for questions. He picked up his tablet, tapped the screen, and nodded once to himself. The trust has now executed, he said calmly. Ownership transfers are complete. Voting rights have been reassigned. My phone vibrated again. This time, I checked it. Messages stacked neatly on the screen, precise, professional, unemotional. Transfer complete. Board access granted. Accounts unlocked. Standing authority confirmed. Years of preparation, activated in seconds. My brother lunged forward. You can't just do this. I looked at him. I didn't, I replied. Dad did. I'm just not stopping it. My sister stood, voice sharp with panic. You knew. You knew all along. I met her gaze. I knew what he wanted, I said. You assumed you already had it. She shook her head. This isn't fair. No, I agreed. It's accurate. The lawyer rose from his seat, gathering his papers. If there are no further questions regarding the validity of the trust, there are plenty of questions, my brother snapped. They can be directed to my office, the lawyer finished. In writing. He looked at me once more. Shall we? I stood. That's when they finally understood. Not because of the documents. Not because of the money. But because the lawyer waited for me to move first. Outside, the hallway felt longer than it had when I arrived. My footsteps echoed against marble floors that had never belonged to me before, but did now, in a way that mattered. My brother followed us out. "Wait," he said. I stopped, but didn't turn around. "You don't have to do this," he said, voice dropping. "We can talk. Work something out." I turned slowly. "For years," I said, "I stayed quiet because I didn't want to be a problem." "You mistook that for weakness." My sister appeared beside him. "We're family." "So was Dad," I replied. "And you didn't listen to him either." Her mouth opened, then closed. There was nothing left to say. Over the next week, the consequences unfolded exactly as my father had predicted. Board members called me, not to congratulate, but to confirm stability. Investors wanted reassurance. Managers wanted clarity. I gave them all the same thing. Structure. Silence. Control. I didn't fire anyone. I didn't make announcements. I let systems run the way they were designed to, without favoritism, without noise, without emotion. My brother's consulting role disappeared quietly when his access was revoked. My sister's influence faded as decisions moved out of informal channels and into formal governance. No drama. Just gravity. A month later, I returned to the family home for the last time. The house was quieter now. Smaller. Stripped of the confidence it once carried. My brother sat at the dining table, staring at paperwork he no longer understood. My sister stood by the window, arms crossed tightly, like she was holding herself together. They looked up as I entered. I didn't sit. "I'm selling the property," I said simply. My brother stood. "You can't." "I can," I replied. "And I am." My sister swallowed. "Where are we supposed to go?" I paused. "Wherever you choose," I said. Just like I always did. I left the keys on the table and walked out. That night, I stood alone in my apartment, city lights stretching endlessly beyond the glass. My phone buzzed once more. Trust fully operational. All matters resolved. I turned the screen off. For the first time in my life, no one was laughing. And for the first time, I didn't need them to. Because silence, real silence, only feels empty to people who never learned how to fill it.